Here folks, and welcome to the final look at the Resto druid DPS question of every patch, Catweaving or Owlweaving. Well, Feral Affinity versus Balance Affinity to give them their proper names. We have a bit to cover, so let's get started. So if you have watched my Covenant videos, you'll know that at most high global cooldown usages for damage, Feral Affinity came out ahead all the time. However, before we go into my final reasoning about what I think will be superior, we have a few other comparisons to make between the two, starting with a recent change, the Soulbinds. So recently the Soulbinds were changed and limited the number of potency slots. As such, acquiring 2 potency slots is harder, and for most Soulbinds you won't realistically be able to use Fury of the Skies, a conduit that increased nature and arcane damage. Balance Affinity made better use of this despite both talents wanting to use it. Its loss hurts balance even more. You could still use it, but it will hurt your ability to both heal and deal damage. Next is Heart of the Wild. During the Covenant tests I took into account the bonus damage but not the secondary effects, namely critical combo point generators granting an extra point, and Star Surge being instant cast. The Feral Affinity bonus is, well, you won't notice it that much, at least while your crit is so low. Having 5 Star Surges be instant every 5 minutes is going to be better than a critical bonus, but the bonus rafts that you're able to spend to free up those global cooldowns won't really be able to match the roughly 100% DPS increase Feral Affinity had. What it really does show is how much Heart of the Wild is very important for balance, and when balance is going to be good, Heart of the Wild is going to be a big part of it. The last point is the legendary used in testing, Circle of Life and Death, the best legendary for DPS that also assists in healing. Magnifying Dots is going to be stronger for Feral Affinity, but Echoes of ENR is likely going to be the strongest in terms of pure DPS, so without Circle, how do they compare? Well, Circle's main power is Moonfire and Sunfire. And while it does work on Rake and Rip, the DPS benefit is far weaker than you'll get from the 2 fires. Yes, it is a DPS increase, but even so, if you did choose to go with ENR over Circle, you'd likely still find Feral stronger. So in all likelihood, if you did try everything to assist Balance Affinity, taking Fury Conduits and ENR, it would still be at best even with Feral Affinity. So before we talk about playstyle, let's touch on AoE, as it serves to show a point well. Swipe and Starfire are the AoE spells in question here, so how do they compare? Starfire, with a cast time of 2.2 seconds here, does 400 AoE damage to an individual, with 4 casts over 10 seconds. Meanwhile, even with the energy nerf, Swipe manages to be used 6 times in 10 seconds, each dealing 470 average damage. Now, Starfire does do more damage to its initial target, but conversely, Feral can melee attack too. And also, this does not take into account the fact that Feral Affinity can use Rake to multi-dot along with Moonfire and Sunfire, so on 2 to 4 targets, it will pull even further ahead. So why is Swipe so much better? A large factor and the most important reason as to why in most situations Feral Affinity and Catweaving is what reigns, it's the mechanics that slow your damage. As a healer, when dealing damage, you are not designed to be able to use every single global cooldown to maximum efficiency. For Feral, this works with instant casts and it gets slowed by energy. Eventually you run out of energy and you can't cast one of your abilities. Balance, meanwhile, is slowed by its cast times. The thing with the cast times is that while you are casting, you can do nothing else. You are dead weight for the entirety of, as I mentioned before, a 2.2 second cast. However, when you are out of energy, you can just return to caster form. You can throw out Moonfires and Sunfire or heal, knowing that when you return to cat form, your energy is back to full and you can just throw out abilities again. This cycle lets you squeeze in healing and do what the term suggests, Catweave. You flow from damage to healing and back to damage. Because so much of your healing and damage is over time effects, you can cover each of the gaps as you do the other. Balance, however, has no downtime that can be used to heal. If you want to heal, you have to drop large amounts of damage to do so. This emphasis on constant usage follows into each affinity's mechanics, combo points and Eclipse. So Eclipse works by making a spell cast twice in a row, and then you have a damage window to magnify the other main spell. To make the best use out of this, you want to make full use out of this damage window. If you watched my Kyrian or Venthyr Covenant videos, you'll understand why such windows don't work so well when what you do need to do is be flexible and revert to healing at the drop of a health bar. The Eclipse mechanic is really designed for balance itself, with such things as instant cast Star Surge, not for the half-done Affinity version. Combo points meanwhile stay on your character. If you keep using generators, you can keep Rip up on the target. However, if you have to spend more time healing, Rip's uptime drops, but you can still keep it up. With Balance, however, if you don't make use of the 10-second Eclipse window, that Eclipse window is gone, and you are not getting it back for a while. Rip is also not as much damage as you might think, not compared to the bonus that Eclipse can give. Rip's power comes from its low energy cost and high damage per cast time. It isn't actually that much better than the Ferocious Bites, it mainly wins thanks to the fact that it has so much less energy cost. Having its uptime drop will hurt you less than missing half of an Eclipse. All of this just means that Catweaving fits its name. It weaves in damage as it heals, flowing efficiently with scores of instant casts and flexible mechanics that let you push damage hard when it needs to be or less when more healing is required. If Balance Affinity power was stronger, and my global cooldown testing in the Covenant system may have hurt this, so numbers could be closer than I put, it would still suffer due to how rigid you need to be in order to put out that damage. Even if on paper it would win, in practice it wouldn't. So Feral Affinity wins on damage, flexibility, AoE and damage patterns. So in pretty much all situations you are going to want to be Feral Affinity. So does Balance Affinity have a chance? Well, if you watched an Covenant video, you'll know that at the lowest global cooldown usages, Balance came out ahead, entirely thanks to Heart of the Wild. As mentioned before, Star Surge being instant cast here also fits with making the very best efficient use of low global cooldowns. If you find yourself in a situation where you can only make use of Moonfire and Sunfire, outside of a rare chance to use Heart of the Wild, Balance has a chance. Balance also has two other benefits that would make it the choice. Despite its flaws, sometimes you have to take a hit for the group. The first is Typhoon. Sorry Feral Affinity, MAME cannot compete with this in most content. Stuns? Everyone has stuns. But Typhoon? That is rare. Sanguine isn't a fix that exists, and while it exists, Typhoon will have a place. It's really if your party needs it, not to mention any other uses it might have, such as interrupting. And while we're on the topic, sometimes the team needs Mass Entanglement instead of Heart of the Wild. Never forget that victory is the most important thing. If Typhoon or Mass Entanglement increases your team's success chance at the cost of your damage, it is a sacrifice you should take. And lastly, range. It's not often an issue now, but sometimes you simply shouldn't be in melee. Needless to say, if Feral Affinity can't get into melee either for mechanics or safety, Balance will win. Well, that was a long summary to say most of the time Catweaving is king, and that will be a joy for those of you who collected the Feral Artifact skins, and those who think the word Catweaving sounds cooler than Owlweaving. Just remember, changing talents is fairly easy to do, and it's worth taking that Balance Affinity talent, sorting out the Moonkin action bar, so when someone sets up that Moonkin symbol in the night sky, you can flap in. Next week's Beta Studies video will look at one of the most anticipated features of the Shadowlands, Torghast. Solo content that you can do as Resto very efficiently. We'll be going over how to unlock it, how it works, and what juicy abilities await you for Resto, and the numerous DPS builds that you can create from them. As a healer, it's going to be fun, so see you there.